And get started. Thank you for sticking with us at the end of a long day and kicking off week 2. It feels like there's a different vibe today than Saturday, so people are renewed enthusiasm. My name is Michelle Medea. I'm Senior Director of Programs and Communications at Second Nature. Second Nature is a small nonprofit that helps advance climate action in and through higher education. Our largest program, the Climate Leadership Network, is comprised of 470 colleges and universities that have made carbon neutrality and resilience commitments. We work with all sizes and types of institutions in the United States in 49 out of the 50. We lost Wyoming. Not surprised. We also facilitate the University Climate Change Coalition, a program that connects 22 of the world's leading research institutions in North America, committed to mobilizing their resources and expertise to accelerate local and regional climate action. Because of our relatively small carbon footprint, the higher education sector may often be overlooked as an important sector in climate conversations. But as Michael Crow, who's president of Arizona State University, said years ago when our program was started, higher education may have only a 3% of our national greenhouse gas footprint, but has 100% of the educational footprint. So we do matter. Today, you'll be hearing from Dr. Georg Zollner, Professor of Entrepreneurship and Sustainable Management at Munich University of the Applied Sciences, Dr. Irene Sami Fahim, Associate Professor and Director of Smart Engineering Systems Research Center at Nile University, and thanks for hosting us. Dr. Franco Montalto, whom we work closely with him. He's Professor of Civil, Architectural, and Environmental Engineering as U.S. Hub Director at Drexel University, which is a member of the University Climate Change Coalition. Facilitating the conversation is my colleague Bridget Flynn, Climate Programs Manager at Second Nature, and prior to joining us, she was the longtime Sustainability Manager at Oberlin College in Ohio.
Thank you so much, Michelle, and welcome everyone. We're so excited to have you to talk about education as a global climate accelerator. And I'm so pumped to have these wonderful panelists with us here today. So what we're going to do is we're going to hear from each of them first, and then we're going to open up for the discussion for the rest of the time. So I'll be asking some clarifying questions and for them to expand on some of the great work that they're doing, and then we'll open it up to you as well. And if you want to share things that you're doing, the power of education, we definitely want to hear from you as well. We have time for a really great discussion here today, so we really look forward to talking with you and to hearing from each of our panelists. So I think if you want to grab the mic, or I can pass it over, whoever, yeah, we'll have you start. Should be on.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Franco Montalto. I'm a professor in the College of Engineering at Drexel University. Drexel, as was mentioned, is part of UC3, also the Urban Climate Change Research Network, which is an international network of practitioners and researchers working on climate change in cities. In addition to my own research and my own teaching on climate issues, I've been working with our administration on trying to get Drexel more engaged on the ground in communities that are vulnerable to various climate risks. And in so doing, and sort of thinking about this problem, I've developed a series of sort of theories about how university and higher education can have a greater impact. And I guess my main sort of thesis is that universities have to do more than buy wind power and build green buildings and make highfalutin statements about climate. What we really need to do is get our faculty working in communities that are at risk to climate change. In so doing, teach students how to do it. In other words, to model that behavior. And I would venture to say that all of the universities represented here have both students who want to make a difference and don't want to wait until the end of their academic program. And if they're in school now, the end of their academic program is very close to when the IPCC says we need to have a very different world than we have right now. They also are busy. They're students, and they want this to be integrated into the way that they are learning. So they don't want, come to an additional workshop on Saturday after you've finished your homework. They want this to be part of how they're being educated. So number one, you have those students. They're there, they're waiting, they're an audience. They want this to happen. On the other hand, you have faculty who are overworked, who are trying to do research, who are trying to do service, who have some aspect of knowledge, and it could be from any discipline, from law to engineering to science to social science to mental health, public health. They have something to say and something that they can contribute to communities who are on the front line of the climate crisis. But they also need a guide. They need to be brought to the problems because they simply don't have the capacity to get out into communities. At the same time, you've got communities that are well-staffed and well-equipped to deal with the climate crisis, but a much larger cohort of communities that are not. They're facing significant climate risks, and they don't have the capacity in-house to study those risks. Universities have academic programs where students have to produce theses, do capstone experiences, engage in practicum projects. Right now, what I see is a lot of individual projects that are not synchronized or coordinated. Often we leave it to the students to find the projects. And this is a reservoir of energy that could be dedicated and coordinated and directed towards the needs of communities that need this work now. And in so doing, addressing the sort of growth and development needs that the students want. So what I've been working on is a strategy for bringing this all together. So trying to figure out a way that a community that has real needs in terms of preparing for the climate crisis can get a guide to who is it within the university, who are the students, who are the worker bees who can do this work, and who are the faculty and the researchers with the knowledge, the specific knowledge that they need. And there's a paper that was produced recently in 2013 that talks about how first-rate researchers have always been geographically dispersed, right? It's very unlikely that a community with a particular need addressing the university that's down the street is going to find the expertise that they need. The expertise relies within the larger, broader network of researchers and academicians that could be anywhere within the nation, the region, the world. And so, on the one hand, we need an indexing of that capacity so that it's available to those communities. But on the other hand, we've got all these well-intentioned faculty and eager to contribute students who are looking for and selecting, as we speak, projects that they're going to dedicate a significant amount of their time to over the next, over their academic program, and they want those projects to make a difference, and they don't know how. So they also need a map. They need wayfinding. They need a way to find the folks who need these projects. And so what we've been doing in a pilot project, we just got funded in the Philadelphia region. We have a proposal to do something at a global scale, and this is where UCCRN, which is this global network of universities and researchers focusing on specifically cities. What we're trying to do is to, on the one hand, index all the capacity, all of the willing professors, all of the academic programs with required capstone theses, independent studies, projects, have that ready to go. And then through a request for proposals process, have a mechanism, a platform, whereby communities could put their projects in front of this network or this networked group of academicians and students so that they can work together. And we've developed a pilot project in the Philadelphia region, just linking together the local universities, and we have a proposal to do this at the global scale. And that's a big part of what I've been interested in, and I guess I'll just stop there. I don't know how long I've been talking, but I'll start there as like my intro to this problem.
So, hi everyone. I'm honored to be among this honorable guests. I'm Irene Sami. I'm an associate professor in the Industrial Engineering Department at Nile University, and I'm the director for the Smart Engineering Research Center. So actually we found out that there is a problem and we need to solve it through education. So we luckily at Nile University realized that we need to do something towards this using our latest technologies and lab equipment. So we started by three main pillars. one of the pillars was trying to pull the STEM school students at our country and different universities in capacity building trainings. And we also found that the training courses are not enough, so we started implementing some obligatory courses at university for promoting the sustainability, circular economy, valorization of waste. So we tried to, like some of these curricula are obligatory and some are elective courses. And finally, we did some competitions. So I'll walk you through these 3 exercises as an example of how Nile University tried to solve this climate change mitigation. First, we found that there are 4 main topics that we need to train the STEM school students. Actually, they come to Nile University as attending these courses, and then eventually they come as undergraduate students. And then, surprisingly, this is very interesting, we found that some of our undergraduates would come to our incubator and do the startup of what they learned in their undergraduate courses. Mainly the green buildings was part of the capacity buildings. We have kind of like international ratings for green buildings. For example, the LEED, it's very well known, but when we come to apply it for the green buildings here, it's kind of a different culture and different usage of materials and different energy calculations. So this was one of the main pillars that we concentrated on, and we tried to explain to the students the difference between the existing building ratings and the new buildings, and how to evaluate the carbon footprint, and how to find a new and easy checklist for measuring the carbon footprint and confirming that this building is green. So this was one of the very successful courses for the STEM school students. Then we moved to the telecom towers, since now people are looking for how to build a sustainable telecom tower with different materials. So we started with finding the foundation of concrete, the base of the telecom tower, and then finding new materials of waste in order to improve the concrete compression force, for example. I don't want to go into that detail, but another topic was soft robotics. Actually, the preservation of coral reefs was very important, and this is kind of, we created a small robot, looked like a fish, so that it could provide the algae for the preservation of, so we're kind of mimicking the natural marine life, so that the coral reefs would be, and this soft robotics actually project was funded by one of the academies for the research in Egypt with 6 million Egyptian pounds, which is a very good amount that all our prototyping and scale up and that. Another main example that we tried to train our students, we had several research projects that were very successful producing sustainable products. So we concentrated on transferring this knowledge to the STEM school students, and accordingly they would have more innovative ideas, of course, as they go along with the course. This course would take around 4 weeks, and they would come twice a week, 3 hours, so that they could see actual prototypes of what we've done in our labs with our research graduate students. So some of the sustainable products that we produced is replacing the styrofoam packaging of food with sugarcane waste, and trying to get the FDA approvals of how to use this sugarcane plate or different packaging plates instead of the styrofoam, which is kind of now banned globally. Beside that, the paper making process in our country is declining since everyone is going to digitalization. So we started to think of other uses of sugarcane waste. Other examples of sustainable products that we do in our labs is producing green corrosion inhibitions out of agriculture waste and banana peels and mostly fruit peels. We also try to transfer this knowledge to our STEM school students also in treating wastewater through using agriculture waste and turning this agriculture waste into activated carbon. Another pillar which is very important that we found out that most of the courses are not obligatory. So we are currently putting like 7 courses as obligatory for our engineering school. They could select 3 of them, mostly related to waste management techniques and selecting each type of waste and see how to valorize it. Other courses related to architect and sustainable buildings and how to find energy reducing materials and how to generally calculate the energy emissions in different buildings. Also, one of the very successful projects is how to how to do some funding and green financing for these projects. And finally, we do a lot of competitions. One of them was a collaboration competition between University of Nottingham and Nile University under a fund from the British Council. It's like a net zero competition where most of the students some of their ideas and they were announced actually in COP27. We had another competition for other students locally in Africa and in Egypt. And it was kind of having several branches, smart, health, education, finance. And then we selected some of these students who attended the training. So we encouraged them and we gave them a certain amount of money to do their application. I took a lot of time. I have a lot to say, but I'll wait for the questions. Thank you.
I've got 2 questions to the audience or maybe to the organizers. I'm used to stand while I'm talking because I'm a lecturer at the university. So if you don't mind, I stand up because then I can focus a lot more on what I want to share. Then also, you gave us the instruction, don't prepare PowerPoint slides. So I have not brought any slides with me, but I have brought some notes with me. And do you mind if I share my notes with you? Okay, so in the digital world, there still exists an analog world. And I have brought you some analog notes. So I'm George Zollner. I'm coming from the HM, University of Applied Sciences, Munich, Hochschule München. And I have underlined the word applied. What is an applied university? Our country knows 2 different types of universities. One are the proper research and academic universities, and the other universities are applied universities. And one big difference of the system is that all the professors, apart from having a PhD, they need to have at least 6 years of practical experience outside of academia. So for example, teaching is my 2nd career. So I had 15 years of industry background before I joined the university in 2010. You see some figures up on the left-hand right corner. So we have got roughly 18,000 students, 14 different departments. Another colleague just said to me, 14 silos. We have got 500 colleagues who teach young people, students, and we run 90 different study programs. So this is the background what we are doing. Yes, when we talk about sustainability in the prospect of a university, we always say we have to cover 6 different fields. Well, the most important field is teaching, because this is our main purpose in our university. So teaching is the main focus on bringing sustainability across to the people. Apart from that, like you do, research is a big part of coming up with sustainable solutions for a better world. And also, from what you said, transfer. So we have to transfer the knowledge to the public. Otherwise, if a journal paper is only read by 20 people, yeah, we are not really addressing the issue. Apart from that, we are currently also changing our governance structure of our university. So for example, we have now a vice president who is in charge for sustainability issues. We also go to our university routines, yeah, and adjust them with the mindset of sustainability. A big field is the topic of operations. We are a state-funded university in the center of Munich. We have got old buildings and so on. So becoming climate neutral is a very big thing to do. And probably with all state-funded universities, we lack the money to come up with the latest technology in order to be climate neutral. And last but not least, and this is the most important thing, we deal with young people. And young people have amazing power. And this is also on our focus. We want to support our students to engage in the whole transformation we as a society have to do in the upcoming future. Okay, so that is the mindset, how we approach sustainability in our school. So coming back to the first thing, teaching. So when I stand in front of my students on a Tuesday morning, this is the main question I have got as a teacher. So I'm teaching business at a business school. So in what I am teaching, am I part of the problem or am I part of the solution? And honestly, in my special field, in business, if I teach standard business, what is published in all the textbooks, I'm in a lot of the cases part of the problem. So if you, I mean, once I stepped out of the industry, I have time now to reflect what we are doing in business. And honestly, this is nothing what we can pass on to the next generation without reflection. So this makes me think. I don't know whether you know this wonderful quote from Albert Einstein. We cannot solve our problems with the same thinking we used when we created them. So if Albert Einstein is right, that our standard textbooks actually only give us the knowledge who leaded us to the situation where we are in now. So if he is right, we definitely need new thinking. And if we need new thinking, then we have to rewrite our textbooks. And I don't know whether we have to rewrite all of our textbooks or only 50% of it or 20% of it, but we have to reflect a lot more what we want to get across to the next generation. So in order to stimulate new thinking, we want to address specific competences. And I've put down the first four. So one competence which we want to get across is critical thinking. So I don't know how many of you are teachers. My experience is that the youth sometimes are not able any longer to ask good questions. They always think that we as the teachers have got the questions or have got the answers, yeah? Or that they never challenge us as teachers. Yeah, is this actually right what we are telling them? Or how can we be better challenged? I want to share one anecdote in this respect because I quoted Albert Einstein and I was told, I don't know whether this anecdote is right or wrong. Not only Albert Einstein was very smart, also his mother was very smart. And when little Albert came back from school, his mother asked him a question when he came home. Can you guess what question Albert's mother asked little Albert? So the question she asked is, Albert, what question did you ask today your teachers which they could not answer? So I think we have to return universities to a field where we ask questions where we don't have answers yet. So we need a completely different mindset, how we spend our time with the young people in the lecture halls. So reflection skills. It's easy. You stop your lectures 10 minutes early and you use the remaining 10 minutes what you have done so far. You are not only talking about the effects of what you're doing, you're also focused on the side effects and the side effects of the side effects and so on. Simply take your time and reflect what you have covered in the last 1.5 hours. It's easy, but we don't do it. We have to cover material and so on. Then thirdly, system thinking, which is actually, and I'm still working on it, by universities, we are set up in different disciplines. So per definition, system thinking is not, let's say, our DNA. And in a lot of the cases when I do my sustainability classes, all of a sudden I need background from my colleagues from social sciences or from people from natural sciences and so on. So with every question I've got, I'm incapable of answering these things. So we have to use the system at the university a lot smarter to bring all the different competences together and interlink those a lot more compared to what we are doing today. And then also value reflection is also an important thing. I mean, I am representing a European university. Probably you have a completely different background. You have a different value system. But the value system, your value system, is not present in our value system. So how can we make sure that we have an interchange of the different values, the values of different disciplines, the value of different regions, nationalities, and so on? So, yeah, there's still a lot to do of what we can do in universities. And finally, also I think for me, really a big leap to come up with new thinking is simply to come up with interdisciplinary classes. It's very difficult to organize in a university because you have different schedules, you have got different buildings, you have got students in different areas. But once you put different people in a room, there is so much inspiration. So in my case, for example, on my campus, opposite side from my building, from the business building, are the social sciences. And for example, the students, they sit in the canteen on different tables. So, and I do know a colleague of mine from social sciences, he gives an entrepreneurship class to social scientists, and I do the same for business students. So since 8 years, we do a social entrepreneurship class together, where we put both students group in one room. And for me, it's a highlight in teaching because all of a sudden I get completely different questions. So when I talk to my students, they always believe what I'm telling them. The social sciences students, they always say, Mr. Zollner, that cannot be right. I don't believe you. Yeah, there must be also a different solution to it. So, and this helps us also to develop my skills in teaching and get the things across to students. And it's fun because you don't get in a routine because you get so much inspiration from the students from the different sciences. So the reason why I'm using, for example, plain paper, I observed that all the design students in our classes, they always scribble on a sheet of paper. So they are a lot better in visualizing things than other people. My colleagues from social sciences, they always talk to me, while we are only good in talking, we are very poor in visualizing things. So we can learn so much from each other when we sit together in a room and are doing joint projects. So we have plenty of opportunities to come up with a better education. So 2 or 3 examples of concrete classes what we do. We run for 8 years now a class which is called Shape the Future. It's an interdisciplinary format, and you see the figures 100, 10, 10. We bring 100 students together with the teachers, with 10 teachers from 10 different disciplines. And we get 10 external project partners on campus, and we work 1 semester on real life problems. It's an amazing experience. It's chaotic, but we learn a lot. Everyone learns a lot. Then co-teaching. As I told you, for example, in my social entrepreneurship class, I learned so much about values. Yeah? Business people have got one value, this is money. social scientists have got 100 values: peace, justice, freedom, and so on. No one in business talks about justice and freedom. We try to come up with a profit margin. Yeah, this is our language. So it helps a lot to bring these interdisciplinary thoughts together. And yeah, we do swaps. So for example, I invite one colleague from the design department who is an expert in the inner development goals. I bring him into my classroom, or a colleague from social sciences, or a physicist who works on renewable energy, to learn from the other disciplines. Yeah, and this also helps, and also I go with my business mindsets to their classes. And finally, well, our students play an important role in the transition to a more sustainable university. And we run a public climate school week. Actually, it's a program run through whole of Germany on the universities. And we have a very active student group who is pushing the topic sustainability among the 18,000 students. And by chance, we have got Emma here in the audience, because Emma is heading the student group in our university, and I want to give the next generation the final sentence on my presentation.
Thank you very much for your introduction and for giving us your voice to us students. And as one of the heads of the Sustainable Student Unit here at the University of Applied Sciences Munich, I want to highlight that combining the forces and the competences of the individuals and uniting the students together, I think, is a very important process for implementing projects and importantly, student-driven projects, as we do at the university, at our university. And so together with supportive professors and engaged students, we are more than motivated to create an impact and to create and implement significant projects at our university. And as a last sentence for our presentation, I want to say, be the change you want to see in the world, because I think every voice and every step counts. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, great to hear from all of you. And my next question really relates to kind of two things. One thing that has been highlighted to me, both at COP and this conglomeration of so many countries and people that are here, is the power of stories. And another reason why I want to ask this question is because students tend to ask it a lot. Which is about your journey to the work that you're doing now, and really specifically around climate action. What brought you to this field, and what this passion and integrating it into your professional lives? It tends to be a personal question, and I think we would be honored if you could share with us how you came to this work.
Thanks for that, and thanks to my colleagues for these amazing presentations. Personally, when I finished my PhD, I went running away from academia because I felt that it was a bubble, people talking to each other about the way the world should be, the world that they chose not to participate in. And I started a consulting company. And I did that for a while and got a little bit frustrated with the ability that I had within the consulting company to innovate. And I found myself in a situation where I needed both. I needed academia as a free place to innovate and interact with students who keep me motivated because they've got fresh ideas and new thoughts, and but a consulting business that allows me to solve real-world problems for real-world clients. And I think, that was 15 years ago. I still have the consulting business on the side, but what I'm really trying to do right now in what I'm trying to do at the university is to bring that together and to figure out how we can solve problems in the classroom, because we don't have time to wait to develop solutions. We can't teach theory and and wait for graduation to solve the problems. We need to be solving the problems right now. And the students have a key role to play, as we just heard. So personally, that's what's motivating me, is wanting to solve problems and engage in innovation at the same time. And I also just want to appreciate very much the role of teaching, because I think that if you address me as a researcher and you ask me to solve a particular problem, I might be able to help you out, but I might not, because of the constraints on me as a researcher working in an academic system, and I have to publish papers, and my PhD student has to graduate, and I have to make sure my PhD student can get a job, so that person needs to publish the next paper in our field, and that's very stressful. But if you address me as a teacher, I can throw 25 students onto a problem next term, and those students will get a dynamite experience educationally, and I'll give you not a research, and I won't give you an academic paper, but I'll give you some really innovative thinking that the students incubate in my classroom when I do exactly what was discussed previously. So I really see the value of teaching as the place where problem solving and education come together.
Actually, for me, it was a bit challenging all over. When I was an undergraduate student, I had my graduation project about like some recycling of materials to produce tiles and table tops. But then there was no awareness. I was really inspired by my professor who wanted to have this as a final product. But at that time, there was no technology, no awareness. I kept trying. I had the lack of information since I'm a material scientist, but I needed some chemical engineering background, and I was just talking to George about it. So I kept learning to find out like the composites that I am dreaming of with totally 100% utilization of waste and no synthetic element at all. So I always was striving to produce sustainable products, but it was always half natural materials and half synthetic materials. And I kept adding upon this knowledge till I finally started to produce one sustainable product with the sugarcane packaging plate. And it took like around 10 years to finalize this trip. So it was kind of challenging but inspiring.
I mean, I shared already part of my motivation for the topic. I mean, when you spend time with students together, you want to make use out of it. And I think the critical thinking part is very important, because for sure we need architects, construction engineers, electrical engineers, mechanical engineers, computer system experts and so on. But they have to have a critical thinking of what they're doing and what will be the result and the causes and the effects. And that's the reason I think we have to bring this also in the curriculum. And I always say I've got the privilege because I teach entrepreneurship and sustainability classes in my university. And there is no textbook out there where it says these are the hundreds or the 1,000 pages you have to cover in this field. So it's all about a mindset. Yeah, because I think the mindset is more important. Once you've got the right mindsets, yeah, you can take your time and go all through the nitty-gritty detailed stuff in your specific discipline, become an expert. Mindset is important, and I think we should use the opportunity we have got to spend time with the students and get to the right mindset.
Thank you. Is this one working? Okay, there we go. Thank you. So I have another couple of questions, and then we'll open up to the audience. But one, just because I don't always have the opportunity to talk to those from other countries, I am very curious, because they're coming from different fields and from different countries, how kind of the system of education and even of tenured faculty can both enhance and prohibit some of the things that we're trying to do around educating students to become, kind of engaged and inspired global citizens who take climate action. So, I can think of in the United States, one, you mentioned interdisciplinary collaborations. Those aren't rewarded at most U.S. universities, and that's a deficit. That's something that really prohibits some really innovative things to happen. And, even the idea of an applied research university where they're working on real problems is also something that, is maybe a little lacking in the United States at times. So I'm curious for you guys, and I'm curious of your thoughts as well on this. Is, you know, in your country and the educational systems that you're working in, are there things that you can identify that really enhance your ability to educate students and, you know, motivate and equip them to go on, and also what might prohibit that?
So I think one of the courses that really inspired and engaged our students was one course called Life Underwater. And specifically, it was like a practical and a theoretical course together. So we had these students diving for around 2 weeks and seeing the real problems in marine life, and then going to the lab to produce the soft robotic system that we wanted to install. And then they would try it themselves inside the water. So they had this diving experience, and then they had this soft robotics experience. So it's kind of interdisciplinary again, and they really appreciated the problem underwater and how to solve it.
My answer is twofold. On the one hand side, a lot of things are going on at universities, and a lot of colleagues are addressing the topic sustainability, but we still live in a bubble. And if you step out of your sustainability bubble, then you see that the majority of universities are still not there. And actually this applies also to students. I mean, even we have got the student movement, Fridays for Future and so on. I don't know how it is in your countries, but still is a very small minority. And if you walk around these different pavilions and if you see the dramatic transformation we have got in front of us, we have to reach to more people. We have to reach to more colleagues who we are teaching. And definitely we have to reach to more students. So it's a beginning, but it's tough and hard in front of us.
I'll just say something from the tenure perspective in the United States. I mean, my own experience was unique in that I was, the folks who gave me tenure appreciated the interdisciplinary nature of my own research. However, I think in many departments that's not the case. And again, what I said earlier, it's strategic that I'm trying to address faculty as teachers as opposed to as researchers. Because for you as a researcher to achieve whatever the bar is at your institution requires you to bend over backwards and do somersaults that are unique and strange and not necessarily going to be aligned with the needs of the communities that we wish to serve, the communities that I think are screaming for assistance in climate and addressing climate challenges. Teaching at well, I'm not going to speak about my institution because I don't want to go on the record saying anything in particular at my institution, but at many institutions, teaching can only hurt you in the tenure process, because if you're identified as a bad teacher and you get bad reviews, it works against you. On the other hand, what we're talking about here makes the teaching experience richer. And so if you have a rich classroom and your students are raving about how engaged they were in your projects because how much they felt like they could make a difference, or how many different disciplines you brought together, or how you exemplified, you know, how this particular discipline can solve real world problems, they're going to give you good rave reviews, and that's going to benefit you in the tenure process while you write your papers that only 20 people read, right? So I think it's very strategic if you want to get faculty who are not incentivized to do this work, to help them to make a more dynamic classroom, and that's by bringing all the problems that we're seeing around the world into the classroom and having the classroom be the place where we discuss innovative ways of approaching those problems. And I think that helps you with tenure, no matter where you are.
Can I just ask you to elaborate on that a little bit more? So, like, how have you approached faculty in trying to get them to integrate this in their classrooms? And can you tell us an example of how that's been successful, or communities that you've worked with?
Sure. and I have a couple of examples that I had written here, but I'm a firm believer in problem-based learning. I think that I can tell you that there is this problem out in the world that we in our discipline have to go solve, but if I show you the problem and I bring the problem into the classroom in all its glory and messiness, the students will understand both why it's a problem, but also, along the lines of what was previously discussed, how challenging it is to address this problem in a real world. So one thing that I do is I bring class clients, quote unquote clients. I don't like the word client because I don't like to think of it as a consulting arrangement. But you could think of it as a class partner who sets the stage. And one of the ways in addressing other faculty who don't necessarily teach in this manner is in hand delivering them a problem to tackle in their class. Number one, it makes their teaching richer, and it saves them. It is a lot of work as a faculty person every time you're teaching a class to come up with a new problem which is going to take your students in a different direction and cause you to stretch as a faculty person to think about it in a different way every single time. It makes teaching more difficult. But if you have an institution, and Drexel is under the leadership of Maddie Stanislaus, who's here today, is trying to create this environment where we bring communities' issues into the academic environment and sort of set them up for faculty to use in their classrooms. And I can give you a few examples of, just to finish, that makes teaching in a problem-based manner easier for faculty. In fact, you might even take away 2 of their classes. One is a field visit to go meet the client. Another is a final presentation where the students present their work. This is helping the faculty person in a very practical way save time, but also making the experience richer. And I have a few examples. I have a class on hydrologic modeling. I'm teaching students how to run models that simulate floods and the issues that are associated with floods. So what I do is I come up with a client. The client comes in and expresses what the need is. And then the client delivers the data, and my students learn how to do hydrologic modeling, solving the actual problem that the client has. And it's an academic exercise. The students make a presentation at the end. But in multiple instances, what has happened is that the class client comes to me as the faculty member afterwards and says, that was really interesting. You got us to think about this in a completely different way. And very often that turns into a long-term research relationship. And it turns into, I've had multiple instances where a student who took that class said, hey, this was great. I want to keep working on this. And it has turned into a master's thesis. It's turned into independent study. It's been integrated into dissertations. So it's, once you create those innovative experiences, those applied experiences for students and for a community, they tend to morph into bigger things that allow you to touch on other things. I'll just mention, I teach a class on sustainable development, and I don't like it to be just gloom and doom about all the problems with sustainability. I like there to be a methods piece to it. So the methods piece is teaching semi-structured interviews and survey procedures. And so we come up with a client, and we conduct an interview, or we do interviews for that client, and that helps then set the scene. In the case of a recent project that I've had in Philadelphia, it's actually set the scene for an application for federal funding for flood mitigation. And my students interviewed 100 people. So you can use the methods component of classes to actually ask some real questions, teach real methods, and address real problems. I have other examples, but I'll stop there and let others speak.
I think a very effective way to engage faculty is we've arranged like a mini colloquium or a conference, and each faculty would find the sustainable part of his research and talk about it, and then we brainstormed a lot of ideas so that we could help each other in creating like a sustainable environment for their thoughts, and again challenge their critical thinking. And this actually got more collaboration between different disciplines of faculty in engineering, and I think it enhanced the mindset of the sustainability, as was discussed before, that we need to do more efforts about that.
I had some acoustic problems to understand your question, Bridget. Can you repeat your question, please?
I was just asking about how you were engaging faculty. So, but I think for you specifically, I mean, you mentioned earlier the like cross-discipline collaboration. So how did you get that to actually happen? And have you engaged with other faculty to get them thinking more innovatively about course design?
So one thing which helps us, we have got in each and every of our 14 departments, we have got nominated spokesperson for sustainability issues. So, and we meet regularly in a semester, 2 or 3 times a semester, and we share our things, what we can done jointly together. So for example, the project Shape the Future is one result, because we said at one time, let's do one class, one project together. And they have got the roles also to work, let's say, across the discipline and within their discipline. And they are saying to convince their colleagues to do work, to join these things in the faculty. But it's difficult because the system works differently. Normally you are alone in the classroom with your students as a teacher. Yeah, you're not used to do something together with a colleague, yeah, and so on. So the system itself, it's at the moment not supporting new learning. And that's the reason we have to change all of the educational system. We are working across our structures and not with the wave, we are working against the wave.
Thank you. I want to open it up if folks have any questions for the panelists. I'll bring the microphone over, and I have a couple questions myself for them, but would love to turn it over to you if anyone has any questions. Maybe you can stand up or raise your hand, and I'll bring you the mic. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Rhaenyra from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Not really a question, but kind of just building on what you're saying. So there are a couple of things out there. We have a big university network that works in the circular economy. And there are a couple of things out there that I just don't know if people are aware of. But first of all, Bard University organizes an annual teach-in on climate change. And they provide like a ridiculous number of resources. It's free as open access. And the idea is that on March, whatever date it is, every lecturer in every single university uses the sustainability lens for the class that they're teaching, which I think is a great initiative and very much in line with what you were talking about, cross-collaboration. And the other thing that I wanted to say is, I mean, we've been talking and working with universities in the circular economy sphere for a long time, and we still see sustainability and circular economy sitting at above undergraduate level. So the majority of that work is in postgrad. And I just would love to hear your views on how your university is thinking about integrating that at an undergraduate level. And just for people's information, like the London School of Economics have been working with us on a compulsory first-year student course. So every single student has to go on the course, and it's got 3 parts to it. It's got artificial intelligence, circular economy, and I cannot remember what the third one is. But like, what are your views on the need to put sustainability teaching into like a fundamentally compulsory course for undergraduates?
So we are also at the beginning of this journey. We had just 2 weeks ago 2-day event on the weekend for freshmen with the topic sustainable entrepreneurship. And we brought 100 students together, and they were working on how can we make better use out of waste. So we wanted to address those things right at the beginning of the studies. But it's also difficult. For example, another anecdote I have to tell you. So I do with my students, or also with practitioners, the so-called 60-second test. And the 60-second test is, well, imagine a white cotton t-shirt. Can you sketch the supply chain of a white cotton t-shirt? And in 99% of the cases, I get the same sketch, which is a linear line starting with the cotton field on one end, and ending up in the warehouse, in the retail on the other hand. And then my discussion starts. Yeah? Why do we start at the cotton field? For example, in my city, if I walk outside the classroom, within 15 minutes, I find a container where you can throw away old clothes. So the resources are there. More than 50% of the people live in cities. All the resources are there. So we are simply not smart enough using old fabric and reuse it for new fabric. Because with the industrialization, we had developed 250 years a linear system, and we have not a circular system. So, but we all have got in mind a supply chain is linear. So, and I always say, well, it's impossible that we teach a linear system in the undergraduate program and a circular system in the master program. We have to start right away in the first semester. A supply chain is circular. And all of a sudden you start asking different questions, you come up with different solutions. So we have to change our paradigms. It's quite an effort. Yeah? So for example, I teach my own sustainability classes, and some of them are electives. And I always say, well, it's nice to have the students in my elective classes, but actually I'm more interested to reach out to the students who don't sign up for my classes. So for example, I came up with small impulses, and I go to my colleagues in traditional supply chain management or in accounting or in marketing and have prepared impulses that the people are forced to rethink what they are doing in that specific discipline.
I guess for us, we started by like a small arrangement of workshops, and we got some underprivileged girls from Africa to teach them about solar cells and how to, and we had like a small circuit associated with some like noises and sirens and fans to be, so we generate solar electricity, and then we try to show them all the principles of this electrical part. But we applied for 2 more programs, sustainability, water, and food security. So I think people are now starting to begin to understand what is the importance of having such programs. And hopefully this might get more undergrad.
I can things that worked and something that didn't work, that I thought was compelling but didn't work. But what I've done routinely for the last 15 years is I offer 3-credit independent studies for students, undergraduate students, who take my class, get exposed to something, decide they want to pursue it. It counts as a technical elective. And as there's really, I found an unlimited supply, which incidentally has helped me out with tenure. When I was going through all of that, there were always these extra classes that I was teaching, and often there were 3 or 4 or 5 students enrolled, and really they were just students, undergraduate students engaged in some aspect of sustainability research that I was doing. So that's been very effective, but small scale in the sense that it's something that I do in my group, and I've broadened that now. I have teams of faculty who I do that with. In fact, right now we have a team of probably 10 students who are doing some climate research for us. We've then tried to integrate climate considerations into required undergraduate projects. For example, our seniors have to write a seminar paper, which is essentially a literature review. And I routinely provide the instructor for that class a list of communities that I know of that have climate-related questions. And the students then, in doing this undergraduate assignment, they conduct a literature review for a community. We have senior design where the students work with individual one-off. I did succeed in convincing my dean that all of the freshman engineers needed to be exposed to a climate science primer. And then I was immediately turned around to me and said, develop that primer. And I did. And it had aspects of industrial ecology, it had aspects of SDGs, it had some of the National Climate Assessment Report, some of IPCC reports. And I was sort of surprised to find out recently that several years later, they're still using the same climate primer. Where I failed was I wanted sustainability and climate to be like our anti-racism work, a cross-cutting theme. Our anti-racism work is now integrated into every aspect of our community, of our university. And I said, I think climate and sustainability should be one of those things. And there was some resistance because of other things that people want to engage or incorporate into the undergraduate curriculum. So I offered the students a challenge, and I said, read the climate primer, take the classes you have to take. If you find a class that you don't think is addressing climate and sustainability, I will give you a 1-credit independent study class for you to write a critique of that class that's constructive and to articulate how climate and sustainability could be incorporated into that. And I said, if you do it 3 times, there you go, you've got a 3-credit independent study. And I wanted to use that as a, sort of use the students to kind of do this screen of the classes that I don't sit in to find out. And everyone sort of saw that as challenging and exciting, but has not done it yet. And I don't know why, but no one has taken me up on that. But that was a sort of a strategy that I had for them.
Do we have other questions? Yeah.
I had a question specific to climate. So this is about a climate accelerator. And when you think about the first thing you would recommend somebody do related to accelerating climate action through the curriculum, either the easiest thing to do or just the first thing you would do, which one would, how would you think about that so that people here could, you know, step away from this saying, okay, this is the thing I'm going to lock into? Because you've described a lot of different things, but some of them might be like 3 years down the line. And I guess I'm curious, like, if you were to pick the top thing on climate and the curriculum, what would it be?
I don't expect my students to become climate scientists. I mean, I don't teach science. I teach engineering, and I don't think it's realistic to, although I talk broadly about climate. But on the other hand, the projections, climate projections for my region, accelerate or make more difficult the problems that we're dealing with. So I start with, I teach hydrology for people, and it's easy for me to just take the old data that we've used over and over again. But what I do is I direct them to a website that NOAA runs where they can actually, it's called the Climate Explorer, and they can explore climate projections. So I just always sort of introduce the problem and then ask how the problem would be different if the temperature were higher, if there were more or less precipitation, if the sea level would be greater. It's not hard to sort of imagine that. And I feel like just using those scenarios, local scenarios, just sort of adds a different dimension to every single problem. And I don't think it's very difficult for you to find wherever you are those projections and just bring them into the classroom.
I like the question, actually. We had the case study about measuring the carbon footprint at Nile University. And I showed the students the results of this measurement so I could challenge their mind. And then they started, like, we didn't have a threshold. Like, we would say, like, this like percentage is good or bad. So I started telling them, think about how could we decrease this measurement in every discipline in the university, either lighting, either cleaning, water. And then they started to be challenged and looked for ideas on how to compare. For example, some of them said we could compare this measurement with other universities. But then it again depended on the number of staff and the number of part-timers and number of students, number of cars in the university. So actually they got a lot of ideas, and it was kind of, we had a focus group on which thing we should start with and focus on. And actually it was the transportation. This was the highlight of how did they find that this is the main issue that had the highest measurement. And we started to find actually real solutions, like we have to measure the number of buses and the number of people using these buses. So actually, I mean, it's trial and error, but you have to challenge their minds.
I like your question, and I had fortunately some time to reflect what is a good answer to your question. And in my point of view, it's really not easy, because when you talk generically about climate warming and so on, it's far away from the discipline what you're teaching. It's very difficult to relate climate change issues if you're, I don't know, are in a computer science class. Yeah. So I think it's required that you translate certain issues in the specific language of your discipline. And this is hard work. So for example, when I started to go in the classroom of my colleagues from accounting, if you do the fundamentals of accounting, how do you come up with a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement? How does this relate to climate warming? So there's not a direct contact. So once you start, what costs, for example, we have got here a discussion going on loss and damages. Who is causing the damages? Who is responsible for the damages? And why are the damages not shown in a balance sheet of a multinational company? And then, for example, in accounting, we have got this rule. The book shows a true and fair view of the company. I mean, if you start to rethink, our accounting shows a true and fair view. I mean, we lie to ourselves. Who is saying what is the truth? We came up with some regulations or some accounting standards, and we think it's the truth, but it's not the truth. We do accounting to our standards, whether their standards are the right. So once you start trying to connect these big issues with your specific field, I think this is what I'm trying to do, is to start thinking in your specific field of your discipline.
I just want to say one more thing on that, because I think, you know, what you just said, both of you, sort of demonstrates the important role that faculty play. And I feel, you know, I hate to say this as a faculty member because I'm, you know, it seems self-serving, but faculty are the critical. Universities are not consulting firms. They're not NGOs. They're not, they're educational, they're places of education. And the individuals who are delivering that education are the faculty. And if the faculty think creatively, I believe that in accounting and engineering and social science and public health, there's always a connection to climate, as you just pointed out, both of you. But if the faculty aren't willing to go there in the classroom, and then this stuff doesn't happen in the classroom, and that deficiency is multiplied by all the students who take those classes. And so the big part of this is educating faculty, but I think faculty are also somewhat resistant to education, ironically. This is why I keep saying you need to make it easier for faculty to talk about climate in the classroom in really just dumb ways. Make it easier to teach classes, because if I am an overworked faculty person trying to do research, trying to teach my classes, trying to stay afloat, do all these administrative responsibilities that are thrown on top of me, it's hard. I happen to be interested, we happen to be interested, but someone who is sort of mildly connected to climate, has never been to a COP, has never really thought about these things, it's easy for that person to say, I'm just going to teach the class the way I did it last year. And so you have to incentivize faculty and to get that into the classroom and then to get it to the students. Otherwise, that critical path there is broken, and then the university continues doing the wrong thing, is my opinion.
I think that's a great point, and you know, we constantly hear students are interested in this topic, so higher ed needs to, and I mean really all education needs to be responsive of that and let students in some ways drive that this needs to be integrated, you know, even if it makes it a little bit harder on some folks' jobs. I think there was another question over here, please.
Hello. Is it working? Okay. Okay. I represent Climate Fresk, a climate education workshop. We have deployed this workshop to more than 500,000 people around the world. So my intervention is both a question and a frustration, because our workshop contains all the keywords you have just shared during this presentation: interdisciplinary, collective, creative, collaborative, based on science, is based on IPCC reports. And yet student-led activities, when students are facilitators of our workshop, they are a success. They organize among themselves in student unions and so on. When we reach administration, higher level in faculties and universities, we feel resistance. So our workshop is easy to be integrated, easy to be implemented, easy to become interdisciplinary, and yet, especially in the global northern universities, I myself work in Sweden, and we feel this resistance of integrating this workshop as a climate education kickoff, for example, for year one, not wait until they are in their masters to learn about these things. So it's a little frustration and also a question, how can we reach, how can we go a bit beyond what a student can organize with their colleagues in the cafeteria or in a library room?
I share your frustration. In fact, back to storytelling, I mean, I started this work a few years ago supporting some students who wanted to, right before COVID, who started doing climate, what were we calling it? Climate protests. Climate wasn't a protest, but it was something like that. And the commitment was they were going to do one per month until the university changed and addressed climate. And then COVID hit and the protests got canceled and we had to stop. But that resistance that you're describing, I've experienced, I continue to experience all the time. And that's where I think, again, I double down on trying to understand what, like, who inside the university is creating the environment, the learning environment, or the lack of an learning environment in the university. And what are the pressures on those people? What are the pressure points? And what are the motivations? And I just keep coming back to the fact that it's a matter of understanding what makes faculty do this versus that in the classroom. You can't tell faculty what to do. So you have to then dig deeper and understand why they structure the class the way they do, and I think figure out ways that you can enhance that classroom experience in a way that makes teaching more pleasurable, more satisfying, more rewarding, and actually, frankly, easier for them. And I know there are people who say, well, why should we do that? I mean, the faculty should just do the right thing. They don't, and I think that's your point. We don't. And there are and the constraints are different in each department, in each university, and so you can't sort of say across the board. But if you look deeper in each department, you'll find out sort of the sort of ways. And I know that doesn't make it easy to talk about this in a whole, millions of students around the world. But university by university, I think there are opportunities by digging deeper. I know that doesn't really answer the question, but.
I think I have an example that might have worked correctly. We had small funds from IEEE that would implement some of our research in a village. So the faculty and the students went there, they built the irrigation canal, it was a small one, and then put the solar cells above, and then they started to calculate the evaporation of water and some calculations that would ensure that the amount of water evaporated is less and all of the system is working with solar energy. So I guess this motivated them a bit that we could do some more volunteer and prototyping in some villages. And we've done that in 3 villages in Egypt. I think that would be part of making them a bit motivated or do the right thing, as you mentioned. But of course, it's not like a correct solution or 100.
I know exactly what you are talking about. So it's really difficult to answer your question. And one person once said to me, who was trained in change management, you have to find the second follower.
Okay. Okay, we only have about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to ask only one question, and then we'll end possibly a few minutes early. Do you have a question as well? Okay, one more audience question, and then we'll have one more closing question.
Well, thank you for... Is it working? Yes. Thank you for all of the informative... Yes, thank you for all of the informative presentations. And firstly, I want to stress on the point previously mentioned by Professor Franco, that the climate issues should be tailored inside the curriculum inside the curriculum of different fields of education, and of a personal experience here during my stay in Sharm el-Sheikh, through the COP and the COI before the COP, I've met a lot of students from different fields, and they were all trying to find the connection between their fields and the climate issues and the climate causes. So we actually need to do this. We need to tailor all of the climate issues inside all of the fields, like art and politics and financing and all of these things. So my question is, what do you think about the possible strategies to connect the climate causes to different fields of education? I'm not talking about the postgraduate only or the undergraduate. I'm talking about all of the stages or all of the levels of educations from the kindergarten to the postgraduates. So I need to listen to your opinions. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over, but I just first want to say thank you for the question. And I mentioned before that I was working at a university before my current role, and we took part in doing an assessment of all the departments that were including sustainability in the curriculum, and it was most of them. So just to kind of set this off on a hopeful note, I think there are faculty in all departments that you can possibly imagine, all disciplines, who are already adapting their curriculum to talk about climate and to talk about sustainability. You just have to find them and get them to encourage their colleagues. And to the primary school, I think that's true as well. There are amazing people doing amazing work in communities to bring especially local issues into the K through 12 schools at an age-appropriate level to wrestle with these issues. So I've seen many examples of this, and I really appreciate your question because it's not happening everywhere, but I think it could be. So I'll turn it over for you guys to fill in on that.
Thank you also for the question. And I'll just answer also as a father. Because unfortunately for my kids, I have 3 kids, and they hear me talk about climate change all the time. And I've realized that I have to be careful because it's very stressful for them to hear about this problem. So when I'm invited by their teachers to speak in their classrooms, little kids, I tend to emphasize solutions. So I tend to look at, interesting strategies that are being used in adaptation, for example, and the kids get it right away. And that's a way of getting them excited to participate in the generation of solutions, as opposed to making them feel like the world that they're about to join is coming to an end. And I think it's very, as you get to younger students, it's even more important to show examples of adaptation, successful adaptation strategies, successful mitigation strategies, things we can do, not to sugarcoat the problem, but to talk about the fact that this is a problem with solutions, and you can be part of it if you structure your academic experiences. You can be part of the development of solutions. That tends to resonate with younger children, in my opinion.
Actually, I think I found a bit of what you're saying in my in my son's school. They tried to give them like a bit of climate mitigation recently, last year. So I think we're starting to go there, and people are starting to be aware. But still, it's a long journey, I guess.
Franco, I like your answer. We have to focus on the solutions. And I think also when we see the different videos here on the COP, we know exactly what's happening outside. But we don't have a vision how the solutions look like. So I think we have to talk a lot more about things that are functioning, things that work, things which are good and so on, and spread this knowledge. So to send also a more positive message across. And we have to find these showcases, what is working. And we have to collect them. And also I think in the end, also with our colleagues, I mean, in our constitution it says research and teaching is free. So you cannot say you have to teach that or this. But if you come up with positive role models, yeah, and you motivate people, we can only get the people when we are able to motivate them. So maybe also we have to tell another story, not what is not working, so what is working.
Okay, one quick last question, and I think your fabulous question really builds on this, which is you mentioned a generation of solutions, and I'm curious if you want to share either a project that came to fruition that really accelerated climate action, or something that your students have done since working with you, or since being at your university, or in other research that you've done with them. You know, I know you guys have done some amazing things that turned into startups. So could you share something that your students have gone on to do, or something that you're proud of that you know, started as an idea and really moved into accelerating climate action?
Okay, I'll just talk about this hydrologic modeling class that I have. Has spun off multiple projects for real communities, but the most recent one is the one that I'll talk about. Again, this is a community that has a major flooding problem. It had no money. It was an environmental justice community, and we used it as a class project. Many students went through my class learning how to model the sewer system in this community, and every time at the end of the class we present the results to the utility, the stormwater utility. And most recently, the stormwater utility said, these results are going to allow us to apply for a $20 million grant to create a flood mitigation park. And they included some of our results in their application, and they were invited for the full proposal, and we're now producing the final benefit cost analysis. It turned into, from an undergraduate 500 level class, it turned into a postdoc position. But it's an example of how this applied community-focused teaching can lead to real tangible benefits for a community, including, you know, the opportunity to apply for a $20 million grant.
We have a startup that came from an incubator. It's selling air fresheners out of fruit peels waste, and they biodegrade in 80 days. And actually, we encouraged this startup by getting all the giveaways of our booth at Nile University in COP27 from this air freshener. So I think this is a very promising startup, and they could again get the, like, we have 5 packs of biodegradable changeable, and then you can get from the startup more if you want.
Sometimes I'm happy with very little things. So if a student comes back to me a year after, 2 years after, and is saying, what you have taught me 2 years ago, this still let me think, then I'm happy.
Thank you. If you want to just take a moment, and I would love to thank all of you for joining us today, for your amazing questions, and for all the great work that you're doing. And please join me in also thanking our panelists for sharing today and for the amazing work that you're doing, inspiring this generation of students to accelerate climate action. Thank you all.